80%. Think about that for a second. That staggering figure represents the volume of all global trade that moves across the water. Everything from the phone in your pocket right now to the fuel powering your city relies on this massive, interconnected network of ships, ports, and underwater cables. It is, quite literally, the invisible lifeline of our modern world.
But what happens if that lifeline just snaps? Imagine the cascading effects of a sudden maritime disruption. We're talking empty supermarket shelves, massive internet blackouts, completely frozen supply chains. It sounds like a movie, but it's not a dystopian scenario. It's a very real vulnerability we are staring down today. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be diving into a powerful, absolutely crucial new framework that's designed to diagnose and fix the vulnerabilities in these global maritime networks. We'll be exploring some groundbreaking academic research alongside real-world military responses to see exactly how nations are actively protecting this critical infrastructure. Okay, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the fragile ocean lifeline, look at the anatomy of a maritime crisis, break down the CIGET framework, take a deep dive into underwater infrastructure, check out NATO and Mediterranean security, and wrap up by steering towards a resilient future. Let's get right into it. All right, first up, the anatomy of a maritime crisis, or what we call the polycrisis effect. Look, the maritime sector isn't just dealing with one isolated problem. It's buckling under the weight of some unprecedented, overlapping global shocks. I mean, we've seen pandemic-driven supply shocks, which, to put it in perspective, tanked passenger ferry traffic by up to 85% at one point. Combine that with a conflict in Ukraine completely rewriting global trade routes, extreme weather, tightening environmental regulations, and highly sophisticated hybrid sabotage, it's the whole shebang, a true polycrisis. Because of this massive polycrisis, old-school logistical fixes simply do not cut it anymore. The real answer lies right at this critical intersection. You have to overlap maritime supply chain research, supply chain resilience, and governance resilience. Think about it. A flawless logistics plan doesn't mean a thing if your national security and governance policies aren't equipped to actually protect it. Moving on to part 2, the CIGET framework explained, or how we go about diagnosing maritime health. To tackle this mess, researchers developed CIGET. It's a groundbreaking academic model that basically acts like a medical checkup for a country's supply chains. It stands for 5 key pillars: connectivity of trade routes, physical infrastructure, governance and policy, environmental sustainability, and finally, the technologies that keep it all running. These 5 things are the absolute essential building blocks for any resilient maritime strategy. Now, researchers didn't just guess at this. They forged this framework by analyzing 6 incredibly diverse real-world case studies. They looked at shifting trade over to the Trans-Caspian route to bypass conflict zones, assessed how ferries survived pandemic lockdowns and green regulations at the same time, and even studied the limits of wave energy up in the Baltic Sea. And what they found was that every single crisis required a very specific mix of these CIGUT dimensions to resolve. Okay, let's zoom in a bit for part 3. Deep dive underwater infrastructure, basically the ocean's nervous system. Historically, the threats to all those underwater cables powering our internet and energy grids were pretty mundane. You know, a dropped anchor here, some extreme weather there. But today, the threat landscape has fundamentally changed. We are dealing with deliberate sabotage, cyber attacks, and hybrid warfare tied to geopolitical rivalries, like what we saw with the Nord Stream pipeline. The chilling reality here is that existing international laws like UN CLOS just lack the teeth to criminalize this kind of modern hybrid sabotage. So, how are nations adapting? Well, they're leaning heavily into the technologies and infrastructure pillars of the CIGET framework. Take Estonia's Seawolf project, for example. They're deploying these smart buoys to get advanced underwater situational awareness. Meanwhile, Portugal has this Dual Sinus initiative where they are developing dual-use port infrastructure. It seamlessly integrates commercial activity, hard security needs, and green corridors, literally proving that environmental sustainability and hard security can in fact coexist. All right, let's look at how this plays out on the global stage. Part 4, NATO and Mediterranean security, focusing on real-world action. Let's set the scene for you. It's Rome, Italy, November 2025. NATO's critical undersea infrastructure network is meeting up, bringing this whole theoretical framework we've been talking about into a highly relevant, contemporary, and super high-stakes setting. With hybrid threats spiking across Europe, NATO is executing a multi-domain response that practically mirrors the CIGET framework. Step 1.
Deeply integrate civilian, public, and private sector stakeholders. Step 2, deploy advanced sensing technologies and drone surveillance. And step 3, enable rapid response through joint civilian-military monitoring. Actually, during this meeting, participants visited the Italian Navy's surveillance center and saw civilian and military experts sitting side by side, actively responding to suspicious underwater activities. Pretty amazing to see in practice.
NATO's Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Jean-Charles Ellerman-Kingombe, really hit the nail on the head. He noted a 360-degree approach to security is vital for the alliance. The Mediterranean region could not be more critical. This perfectly encapsulates the governance and connectivity pillars. Because if the threats are all interconnected, our cooperation across military, public, and private sectors absolutely has to be too. And guys, this situation has escalated rapidly. NATO only established this critical undersea infrastructure network back in February 2024. Then, following major Baltic Sea disruptions in December, they launched the Baltic Sentry mission to beef up their military presence. Now, late in 2025, they're expanding this proactive systemic resilience model right into the Mediterranean. It's a definitive shift from just reacting to accidents to actively defending against hybrid warfare. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5. Steering towards a resilient future and applying CIGET globally. Ultimately, getting true maritime resilience means finding perfect balance. Whether you are running a commercial port in Estonia or you're a NATO commander down in Italy, you just can't ignore any of these elements. You need technologies to monitor the threats, infrastructure to withstand them, sustainability to stay compliant, connectivity to keep trade flowing, and governance to legally tie the whole thing together. If even one of these pillars is missing, the entire system becomes vulnerable. So, as global threats continue to rapidly evolve, from pandemic shocks all the way to targeted hybrid warfare, you've got to ask yourself, is your national maritime strategy sinking or swimming? The invisible lifeline of our modern world is under more pressure than ever before. Protecting it isn't just about ships and sailors anymore. It takes smart policy, cutting-edge tech, and unparalleled cooperation. Thanks so much for joining me to explore the CIGET framework, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.